September 8, 2022. Balmoral Castle, Scotland. At 3:10 in the afternoon, a single announcement from Buckingham Palace changed the course of modern British history. Queen Elizabeth II was dead. For 70 years, she had been more than Britain's monarch. She had become something rarer, a constant in a world that rarely stood still. Governments changed. Wars began and ended. Prime ministers came and went. Entire generations grew up knowing only one sovereign. And then, in a single day, that certainty disappeared. The question that followed wasn't simply who would wear the crown. That answer was already written into history. The real question was something far more difficult. Who could carry the spirit of Queen Elizabeth's reign? Because history has always shown that a throne can be inherited. A legacy cannot. It has to be earned. And in the months and years that followed, millions of people across Britain and around the world began watching the royal family through a different lens. Every appearance, every speech, every quiet gesture was measured. Sometimes consciously, sometimes not. Against the extraordinary standard Queen Elizabeth had established over 7 decades. Among those carrying that responsibility was Princess Anne. Unlike many members of the royal family, Anne has never seemed interested in public adoration. She rarely seeks headlines. She seldom gives emotional interviews. She has spent most of her life believing that the work itself should speak louder than the person performing it. It is a philosophy remarkably similar to the one her mother embraced. Stay with us, because understanding Princess Anne's quiet influence begins long before Queen Elizabeth's final days. It begins with a lifetime spent watching duty from closer than almost anyone else on earth. Born on August 15, 1950, Anne was Queen Elizabeth II's second child and only daughter. From childhood, she observed the enormous discipline required of a constitutional monarch. Unlike ordinary families, personal desires often came second to public responsibility. That lesson would define her life. As the decades passed, Anne quietly became one of the hardest-working members of the royal family. Year after year, official records frequently placed her among those carrying out the greatest number of royal engagements. There was little fanfare, no carefully cultivated celebrity, no dramatic reinvention, just work, charitable visits, military ceremonies, hospital openings, meetings with volunteers, support for organizations serving vulnerable communities. Her dedication earned admiration across political divides because it appeared rooted not in popularity, but in consistency. It echoed a principle Queen Elizabeth herself demonstrated repeatedly. Duty is not measured by applause. It is measured by showing up. That same philosophy shaped the late Queen's reign through moments of triumph and unimaginable challenge. She navigated constitutional crises, public criticism, family difficulties, and profound national grief while maintaining an extraordinary sense of continuity. Her speeches rarely centered on herself. Instead, they emphasized service, resilience, and hope. Those qualities became inseparable from her public identity. When she passed away, many wondered whether those values could survive in an institution facing enormous modern pressures. The monarchy was entering unfamiliar territory. For the first time in 70 years, Britain had a king. King Charles III inherited not only the crown but also expectations unlike any faced by a new monarch in modern history. Alongside him stood Queen Camilla, assuming a role that had evolved significantly over time. Her position reflected years of gradual public acceptance following a long and often scrutinized journey. As queen, her responsibilities expanded through official engagements, charitable work, and support for the king. Public opinion toward Camilla has changed considerably over the years, though it has remained diverse. Supporters point to her dedication to literacy initiatives and domestic violence awareness, while others continue to view her through the lens of earlier chapters in royal history. Such differences illustrate a broader reality. Every senior royal steps into public life carrying different expectations and different histories. But there was another figure whose public standing continued to grow with remarkable steadiness. Catherine, Princess of Wales. From the moment she married Prince William in 2011, Catherine understood that every public appearance would invite comparison. Not only with Diana, eventually with Queen Elizabeth herself. Those comparisons were never officially encouraged, nor could they truly be avoided. Over more than a decade, Catherine built her public role gradually. She focused on initiatives involving early childhood development, mental health awareness, family well-being, and community engagement. Rather than expanding her portfolio rapidly, she often chose long-term projects that reflected continuity over spectacle. Observers frequently noted her composed public manner, her preference for preparation over improvisation, her ability to remain calm under extraordinary attention. These characteristics reminded some commentators of qualities long associated with Queen Elizabeth II, though each woman's circumstances and personality remained distinct. Perhaps that is why discussions about the future of the monarchy increasingly centered not only on titles but also on temperament. What kind of leadership does a modern constitutional monarchy require? Is it visibility, popularity, tradition, or something quieter? Princess Anne has rarely answered such questions with words. Instead, throughout her career, she has answered them with example. Those who have worked alongside and often describe meticulous preparation, remarkable memory, and unwavering commitment. Whether attending hundreds of engagements each year or supporting charities over decades, she has demonstrated a style of public service built on persistence rather than publicity. It is precisely this consistency that many royal commentators identify as one of Queen Elizabeth's greatest gifts. Not perfection, dependability, the kind of dependability that becomes visible only over years, sometimes decades. Then, in early 2024, another unexpected chapter reshaped public perceptions of the younger generation of the royal family. Catherine revealed that she was undergoing treatment for cancer. Her announcement was deeply personal, calm, measured. She spoke directly to the public with honesty while asking for privacy for her family during treatment. The response was immediate. Messages of support arrived from across the world. For many people, it was a reminder that beneath ceremonial appearances and royal traditions are individuals facing profoundly human experiences. Illness does not recognize titles, nor does uncertainty. During the months that followed, Catherine stepped back from public duties while focusing on recovery. When she gradually returned to selected engagements, many observers interpreted her appearances not simply as royal events, but as symbols of resilience. Not because she claimed extraordinary strength, but because she allowed vulnerability to exist alongside responsibility. That combination resonated deeply, perhaps because Queen Elizabeth herself had long embodied a similar lesson. Strength is often quiet, not dramatic, not performative, just steady. And as Britain continued adapting to a new reign, conversations about legacy increasingly became conversations about values rather than succession. Because the greatest inheritance Queen Elizabeth left behind was never the crown itself. It was an example that no document could assign, no ceremony could transfer, and no title alone could guarantee. The question was no longer who stood closest to the throne. The question had become something infinitely more enduring. Who would spend the coming decades proving, through actions rather than words, that Queen Elizabeth's understanding of service still had a future? That answer would begin to emerge in ways few expected. And for Princess Anne, the years ahead would reveal just how much influence quiet leadership can hold. There is a curious truth about institutions that survive for centuries. They rarely change all at once. Instead, they evolve through countless quiet decisions, through the people who choose what to preserve, what to adapt, and what to leave behind. The British monarchy has always depended on that delicate balance. After Queen Elizabeth II passing, the world naturally focused on King Charles III. Every state visit, every speech, every ceremonial appearance carried enormous symbolic weight. He was no longer preparing for the throne. He was living its reality. Yet while cameras followed the king, another story unfolded more quietly. It was the story of the values that had defined Queen Elizabeth's reign, and how those values would continue without the woman who had embodied them for 70 years. Stay with us, because this wasn't simply about public appearances. It was about whether consistency, restraint, and lifelong service could still matter in an age driven by headlines. princess and rarely entered those headlines. And that, perhaps, was precisely the point. Unlike many public figures, and has never appeared particularly interested in shaping her image. Her calendar remained filled with engagements that often attracted little international attention. Meeting volunteers, supporting charities, recognizing emergency workers, visiting rural communities, and standing beside organizations she had served for decades. There were no dramatic reinventions, no carefully orchestrated attempts to redefine herself. Only the quiet rhythm of service that had become familiar over a lifetime. Royal historians have often noted that and inherited more than her mother's work ethic. She also seemed to inherit her instinct for separating personal feelings from public responsibility. That discipline has earned her respect across political and media divides, even among people who hold differing views about the monarchy itself. It is an unusual achievement, because consistency is rarely exciting. But over time, it becomes reassuring. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla continued settling into the role she had inherited through circumstance and history. Her path had never been straightforward. For decades, public opinion about Camilla had been shaped by events that deeply affected the royal family and the nation. Those memories did not disappear overnight. Yet her years of supporting King Charles, together with her charitable work, particularly in literacy and raising awareness of domestic abuse, gradually reshaped how many people viewed her public role. Still, comparisons with Queen Elizabeth II were inevitable. Not because Camilla invited them, but because every queen who follows an extraordinary predecessor faces the impossible task of being measured against history. No one could become another Elizabeth II. The late Queen's reign belonged to a unique chapter of British history. What came next would inevitably look different. That reality became increasingly clear as Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, assumed greater visibility within the monarchy. For years, William had spoken about modernizing certain aspects of royal work while preserving its essential purpose. Catherine, meanwhile, had approached public life with remarkable patience. Rather than attempting to do everything at once, she developed a focused portfolio centered on early childhood development, mental health, family well-being, and community resilience. Observers frequently pointed out that this approach reflected long-term thinking rather than short-term publicity. Projects were allowed to mature. Research-informed campaigns. Relationships with charities developed over years instead of weeks. It was a slower style of leadership, one that rewarded endurance over immediate attention. And perhaps that is why many people began drawing their own comparisons. Not because anyone within the palace declared Catherine the successor to Queen Elizabeth's legacy, but because they recognized familiar qualities. Patience, preparation, calm under pressure, an ability to let actions speak before words. Those comparisons remained matters of public perception rather than official endorsement, yet they became part of the broader conversation about the monarchy's future. Princess Anne herself has never publicly suggested that one royal should inherit Queen Elizabeth's legacy over another. Instead, her own actions consistently reflected the belief that legacy is preserved through conduct rather than symbolism. That distinction matters, because institutions survive not through imitation, but through character. Around this time, Catherine faced one of the most personal challenges of her life. Her announcement that she was undergoing cancer treatment transformed the public conversation almost instantly. For years, she had been photographed at ceremonies, charity visits, and royal tours. Now, millions saw something different. Not a princess, a wife, a mother, a woman confronting uncertainty with remarkable composure. Her video message avoided dramatic language. Instead, it reflected honesty, gratitude, and hope. She acknowledged the fear that accompanies serious illness while emphasizing the importance of family and recovery. The response crossed political boundaries and national borders. Messages of encouragement poured in from around the world. Many viewers remarked that her calm delivery reminded them of Queen Elizabeth's reassuring addresses during moments of national anxiety. Not because the situations were identical, but because both women communicated through steadiness rather than spectacle. It demonstrated something increasingly rare in modern public life. Strength expressed quietly. If you've ever admired someone not because they demanded attention, but because they carried difficult moments with dignity? Tell us in the comments. These stories often remind us that resilience isn't loud, it is lived. As Catherine gradually resumed selected public engagements, commentators observed how carefully those appearances were managed. There was no rush to return to a full schedule. Recovery remained the priority. That decision itself reflected another lesson often associated with Queen Elizabeth's reign. Duty matters, but so does wisdom. Knowing when to pause can require just as much courage as knowing when to continue. Throughout these developments, Princess Anne continued much as she always had. Working, traveling, supporting organizations, representing the crown. There was something almost symbolic in that consistency. While public debate frequently shifted from one headline to another and remained rooted in habits developed over decades, it suggested that preserving a legacy is rarely accomplished through grand declarations. Instead, it happens through repetition. One engagement after another, one act of service after another, one year after another. Gradually, many royal observers began speaking less about personalities and more about principles. Which values would define the next generation? Public duty or celebrity? Continuity or constant reinvention? Service or visibility? The answers, of course, were never simple. Every generation inherits challenges that the previous one could never have anticipated. Queen Elizabeth governed through post-war reconstruction, decolonization, technological revolution, and extraordinary political change. King Charles now leads during an era shaped by social media, global uncertainty, and evolving expectations about public institutions. Prince William and Catherine will face different realities still. The monarchy cannot remain frozen in time, yet neither can it abandon the qualities that gave it stability in the first place. Perhaps that is why Princess Anne's example continues to resonate. She rarely speaks about legacy. She simply lives according to principles many associate with it. And perhaps that is the most enduring tribute any daughter could offer to a mother whose life became synonymous with service. But even as the royal family adjusted to its new chapter, another question quietly emerged. What happens when the people entrusted with preserving an institution must also redefine it for an entirely different generation? The answer would reveal that the future of the monarchy depends not only on tradition, but on the courage,